Hi, everyone. My name is Lee. I work out of the TMU library, as Jessica mentioned, and my work involves research, some teaching, and mostly art direction and multimedia design. So it's a bit of a catch-all position, but I'm really enjoying it because it is that. So let's jump into the presentation. Just one moment. Bear with me here. Can everybody hear me okay? The volume's okay? Yeah? Great. Okay. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about designing academic posters. As I understand, as part of bridging divides, you'll be presenting your research via a poster in the spring at some point. And so I'm here today to help you and guide you put something together that you're proud of and that represents your research. So, quick look at the agenda. First, we're going to talk about the purpose of the poster and visual literacy. What is visual literacy? The anatomy of a poster, how to condense your research. We're not really going to focus on that too much because Joanne, in the previous session, Joanne did a lot on that as well as, perfecting your pitch and whatnot. So, we'll just briefly touch on condensing your research and then we'll do a quick activity. And then we'll move into design principles. We'll talk about hierarchy and grids, the power of white space, typography, color theory, data visualization, another quick activity. Oops. And sorry. And then we'll get into sort of the nitty-gritty, setting up your file, what kind of software you might want to use, where you can find free images that are safe to use, and a list of free resources that you can use, pre-design resources, sorry. And then Brintha will put together a presentation or has put together a presentation on accessibility. So I touch on a lot of it, but not, she's very specific and in what makes your poster accessible. So Brintha will talk about that at the end. Okay, so what is the purpose of your research poster? It's a visual abstract and a networking tool. It's not your manuscript on a cardboard. And I feel like Joanne talked about that a lot too. Like, we're not here to talk about the details. We just want to get high level what your research is about. A poster is a visual medium. When attendees are walking down the aisle of a conference or a poster session, you have about 3 seconds to grab their attention. So if your poster looks like a solid block of text, their brain decodes it as too much work and they will just keep walking. So we need to design it for the human attention span, which is quickly decreasing. So Oh, sorry, I meant to touch on knowledge mobilization as well. Okay, so if you are a researcher, you probably are well aware of knowledge mobilization and that most funding bodies require some knowledge mobilization as part of their funding package. So no knowledge mobilization can look like many different things, presenting a paper, a poster, a podcast, and it's actually expanding more and more now. So there's a lot of creative ways to talk about your research. It's basically a blanket term for knowledge exchange, knowledge dissemination, and getting your research out into the public and academic and non-academic spheres. So let's get into the anatomy of the poster. So we have our header. I suggest your header be about 10 words or less. It's informative, it's a snapshot of your research, and large enough to read from 10 feet away. Authors and affiliations, the names of all the contributors and their institution. Intro, Uh, identify your research problem, the context, and your project purpose or your hypothesis. Your methods, a summary of your research strategy, materials, and procedures. And this is generally where you're going to see flowcharts and diagrams and whatnot, as well as the results. Um, Depending on the discipline, this can look a little different. So a humanities research project may not have methods, for example. This isn't a hard and fast anatomy of the poster, but this is generally how posters are sectioned. So your titles may look a little different depending on your research. Um, then we have discussion and conclusion and references and acknowledgements. So that can look like a lot of different layouts. You can choose, uh, here we have the images on the bottom. And anyway, this is just a great example of how the same content can look in different layouts and it's still tidy and it's still presentable. So here is an example of sort of a wireframe of the poster and the poster anatomy and what it can look like when you start to add design elements. So, a big part of preparing to make your poster is condensing your research or killing your darlings, as William Faulkner would say. Just basically all this text and content that you've worked so hard to be so deliberate and precise about has to just be chopped down and made into really short, digestible paragraphs. So, you want to definitely keep the audience in mind. If the audience remembers one thing, what do you want that thing to be? So identify your core takeaway. Generally speaking, under 800 words total for a research poster is where you want to aim. Um, I've seen some suggestions around 300 to 500, but that's really chopping it down. So I would just say keep it under 800. And the iceberg method applied to your poster is you want people to see the poster and get a really good impression of what your research is about, the feel, the objective, and again, the core takeaway. So, if you will bear with me here, I would love to learn a little bit more about your research projects if you're willing to participate. We're going to take 3 minutes and use the structure of a haiku to describe your research using the what, why, who pattern. So, uh, this is just like a turbo version of condensing your research. So if you had to make a haiku about your research, what might it be? I'm going to start a timer and would love if some of you might share. Totally cool if you don't want to, but it's a good way to think about shortening and condensing your research. Okay, we have about 60 seconds left. If anybody has anything or has one done already, please feel free to either put your hand up or put it in the chat. Yes, thank you, Eli. 5 syllables. Sorry. 575, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. Okay. Okay, awesome. I see we have some here. This is exciting. Okay, so Mia, do you want to read it or would you rather I read it?
I can read it. Thank you. So, migrants in regions, do they feel like they belong? Workers in Quebec.
Nice.
I could expand a bit about, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate setting, but it's basically about regionalization policies for migrant workers in Quebec. But regionalization is a very long, has many syllables, so I can
Got
put
it.
that
Yeah,
in there.
yeah, no. No, I feel like I mean I don't know your research. Um, this is my first exposure to it, but it seems like this is a really good snapshot of it. Um, Ronnie, did you want to share yours? Okay, I will read it. Memory and art, recent wave of migration, me and Hong Kongers. These are making me want to read your posters there, or maybe even your full research project. That sounds really, really interesting. Okay, thank you for putting those together. That was great. Um, I will, oh, there we go. This one is one that I did. I researched visual literacy with AI and how that's evolving and changing. So mine is Minds Read What Code Draws, Parsing Truth from Forged Pixels, New Ways We Must See. So again, a sort of fun exercise to really bring your research down to just a few syllables. Okay, let's get into part two. So we're kind of getting into the design 101 bit here. I usually like to start by just saying that a lot of people sort of conflate art and design, but I really want you to think about them distinctly in this context. Um, Design has to do work, art does not. Design uh, is solving problems. Design is the intermediary between information and understanding. So we use design as a tool to solve problems, to convey um, information and for communication. Whereas art, you're kind of it's a lot more subjective. There's a lot of crossover, but um, yeah, I would just want you to think about design and art as two different concepts for these purposes. So, what are the design elements you'll be including in your poster? Text, obviously, images, lines and shapes, and negative space. What are the tools we have available to us to make your elements sing? How can we make your research uh, jump off the page? We have hierarchy, we have color, composition, and typography. So, information hierarchy, guiding the viewer's eye logically. So Western world, we have two general reading patterns, F pattern and the Z pattern. So F patterns is usually when they're scanning text, and the Z pattern is scanning really visual layouts. So things to keep in mind when you're picking where you want to put your introduction, methodology, and those elements or the sections that we talked about in the anatomy portion. And then a grid system. Most really good design uses an invisible grid system. So when I say grid system, it's nothing complex. It's basically just uh, giving your work balance. So things look balanced, things look like they have a home. And I can show you a little bit more about that next. I have this wild example here to show you how to not do this. Um, though there might be it looks like there's about 6 different grids here. There's the hierarchy. The first thing I read in this example is Hamfest. So I mean they got that for hierarchy. And then my eye goes all the way up to the red and the yellow and the top right. And then I just don't know where to go. Then it's just all over the place. So um sorry, I just saw Desmond. Are we getting the slides after the meeting? Yeah, I can share my slides with you, no problem. Um, so again, this is just an example of what not to do. And there's so many more reasons not to do what's going on here. But as a reading flow example, this is going to confuse people. So here's a nice tidy example of how hierarchy can work in your favor. You know, you will read this first, then you'll most likely and then you'll probably read this immediately afterwards, and then most likely leave this for last. So it's just a bit of a reading flow situation. And then beside, we have a grid. So though both spreads of this magazine, they have different layouts, they're still using a very similar grid, so they look harmonious together. So something to think about when you're putting your poster together. Okay, so let's talk about the power of white space. So you might want to resist the academic urge to treat empty space on a poster as something that is an opportunity or needs to be filled. White space gives the brain room to breathe. Um, it's too much mental load if every space on the poster is filled with text or image. You need flow and you need breathing room on your design so that it's pleasing and less mental load to read and to process. It's structural, it's very deliberate, it's not wasted space. And again, it reduces the cognitive load and it can help group items together. So if you have more white space, um, like between sections, it sort of tells the user that this is a new section. So you can use it deliberately in that way. Okay. So a golden rule is a poster with approximately 40% white space is infinitely more readable than one crammed edge to edge. So aim for around 30 to 40% white space, and that should give your reader a um, good readability. Okay, so let's get into typography. So typography, we're just really touching on high level stuff here. But first of all, we want to talk about spacing and reading. Increasing your line height really helps legibility. Alignment, as we were saying, we read left to right. So your poster probably definitely the body text should be left to right. And you can see in the example here, we have the right side. This is called ragged. And in the example on the right, it's called justified. So we almost always want to use aligned left ragged, um, because when you use justified, it creates, if you squint and look at the justified column, you see something called rivers and valleys. So you see like these big white, these gaping white spaces in the text, and that really increases mental load for the reader. So if you have it a little more tidy, like on the aligned left ragged, it's a lot easier on the user's eye. One thing I wanted to mention, a lot of people use typeface and font. Uh, it's they conflate typeface and font. However, typeface is the family of fonts. So if we're talking about Times New Roman, that's a typeface family. It's a typeface. And then if we're talking about a font, we're talking about Times New Roman bold italic. So that's the cut of the typeface. So the font is um, the more specific cut, and the typeface is the family. So just a little typography um, jargon. Typography also has plays a role in psychology. When we see different typefaces, it connotes different things. So let's get into that a little bit and how that can be useful in your poster. Whoop. Ah, here we go. Okay, so different typeface classifications. So there are a lot more than this, but I feel like for posters, this is a good high level snapshot. So let's get into serif typefaces. So these are serif typefaces. The serifs are these little lines or little feet on the typeface, and these uh, they really mean something more traditional, respectable, authoritative. Sort of people use serif typefaces for high-end sophistication, luxury. If you think of like Tiffany's or Dior or that kind of thing, they're all serif Vogue, um, luxury. They have these serif typefaces. This is how type was originally done, and so they also sort of connote a lot more tradition and sometimes a little stuffy, but that's sort of how they're the meaning that they connote. And then we have a slab serif. So a slab serif is really like these big, big feet and like really bold, heavy letters. So slab serifs are known for being loud and proud, safe, and just I'm here, pretty dominant. So New York City and Volvo are a great example for that. Volvo cars are really heavy. They're known for safety. New York is I've never met a New Yorker that wasn't proud of being New Yorker. It's great. Um, then we get into sans serif. So basically the absence of these little feet. And um, they're generally known for sort of more modern, bold, contemporary, and confident use, especially when you're using all caps. Um, and yeah, more modern, clean. Uh, it's a more modern and clean meaning. And then we get into script. So script usually communicates elegance, creativity, something personal or something formal. If you think of sort of ball or wedding or gala invitations, they usually have script font on there somewhere. And then display. So display text is usually something with a ton of distinct personality. A lot of times they're custom. I wouldn't recommend using a display font for your poster unless it really speaks to your research. So when you're choosing your typeface, keep these things in mind because each classification of type will convey a different meaning. Okay, let's move on to color. So just find my notes here. Okay, so use the designer's 60-30-10 rule. So 60% of your poster is a quiet background color. 30% of the color on your poster is your text, and then you have 10% for accent colors. I can show you some great examples of that later. Um, Use the accent color strictly to highlight really important findings. Maybe if there's that one thing that you want people to remember, or if it's a stat or a data point that's really important, that's when you use your 10%. And remember accessibility. So Brintha will talk a little bit more about this, but always have dark text on a light background or really light text if you have a dark background. Um, Sorry, I'm just reading is it recommended? I will get to questions at the end, so hold on to your questions and then we'll go through them. Um, Also avoid red-green combinations, especially if you're using something like a scatter plot, because the red-green color blindness, around 10% of men have red-green color blindness. So I just have a little graphic here to show you what an image might look like if you have red-green color blindness. So if you have some really important data that you need to show, keep that in mind because you don't want to have um, a red-green scatter plot and your reds and your greens are mixed together and then you can't discern what's what. So much like type, color psychology is a pretty big field of research. Different colors communicate different meanings. Um, and always think of your audience and your context. So um, the meanings that are listed here are mostly for Western culture, but especially in Bridging Divides, you're speaking to so many different cultures. So keep in mind um, what that color might communicate, and it's also a really helpful tool on how to help um, communicate your research. So if you're working in healthcare, or if you're working in healthcare, if you're researching healthcare, you might want to think of some blues. That's often a color used in healthcare. We have red. I would not use red in healthcare. And then, yeah, just pick a color that speaks to your research, not just because you like it, because you want the purpose of these is so that you can communicate your research. So we're using all these tools to do so. So here's an example of how um, impactful color can be. So here we have on the left, we have a cooler tint, like a light blue tint on a picture of French fries. And on the right, we have a warmer gold tint on a picture of French fries. Um, Warmer gold, red, those sort of colors are often used in food advertisements to stimulate hunger. It has a psychological effect on you. So I don't know about you, but I would much rather eat the fries on the right than the fries on the left. Um, I think that's right. I'm just hoping my screen is the same way. Anyway, I would much rather eat the fries with um, the gold hue tint over it. Sorry. Um, Okay, now how are we going to pick the colors for your research poster? So there are some tricks that you can do that you can use to help you pick whatever color you're going to go with as your sort of main color. Three different options. There we are. Three different options that I always find helpful. And they're usually pretty safe. We have monochromatic. So here's the color wheel. A monochromatic color palette would be picking one color and then using different shades and tints of that color. So here we have red. When I say tint, shade, tone, hue, these words are thrown around a lot, and often the same, like meant as the same thing. However, they are uh, all different meanings. So a tint is when you add white to a color. A shade is when you add black to a color. A tone is when you add gray to a color. And hue is the actual core color. So for the monochromatic palette here, the hue is red, and you're using different shades, tones, and tints of red to create your palette. And usually that's pretty harmonious. And you get a lot of nice variety in there too. So this little blue house here is a great example of a monochromatic color palette that works well. Next, you can do analogous. So that's basically picking three colors that are beside one another on the color wheel, and then again going into using the tints, shades, and tones of those colors. So they almost always work really well together. And then complementary. So complementary is basically you pick a color, and then whatever color is opposite from that color on the color wheel is going to be complementary um, to your color. So purple and green, blue and orange. Um, well, red and green we talked about. They can work together, but make sure they're not um, together on a scatter plot diagram. Again, so depending on what your research is, uh, pick your color carefully because it can really be an effective communication tool with how you're conveying your research. Okay, so let's talk about data visualization. So a nice um, piece that people often look at after the title um, in research posters is if you have really eye-catching graphics, um, and a piece of a data visualization that really captures your research, um, it can be a huge asset to your poster. It can say so much more than a big block of text, and it can say it quickly, which is really important in a poster conference. Okay, so choosing the right chart. Um, of course, you'll want to match the kind of visual that fits your data type. For quantitative research, scatter plots, Sankey diagrams are particularly good for migration flows and that kind of thing. Please, please, please avoid the 3D effects on the bar and pie charts. They're no. Um, and then for qualitative research, it can look like a lot of different things. We can do journey mapping, pull quotes, using lots of white space, thematic maps, and relationship webs. Some people like to use word clouds, and that can work sometimes as well. So here on the left, we have a less quantitative data showing here. So it's a good use of icons. So icons are really helpful as well. And I've shared some resources with how to find icons that are free to use at the end. So that will be included. Icons are a great way to quickly tell your audience what what you're talking about. Um, and then again, here we have a journey map flowing through the poster. So it does a lot here. This creates a nice flow of information, but it's also communicating a journey that applies to the research. Now, on the other side, we have a nice use of color here, and it's all quantitative information with a variety of different graphics. So if you can recolor your graphics in programs like Canva, um, or there's another resource that I'll share with you that's like a free Photoshop, basically. It's an open source Photoshop. You can recolor your graphics so that they match your palette that you've chosen for your research. Um, if you can do it without changing the efficacy of your your data visualization, then by all means do it. Canva and Noun Project is one of the places I would suggest getting icons. Um, will help you make your messages really stand out. So here we just have a quick example of, it's the same information, but this is a lot more visually appealing than just this block of text, especially when you're just walking by. So we have a quick activity here. Now that we've learned a little bit about design principles and color and type, uh, I'm just going to canvas you all for what you think is working here and what you think is not working in this research poster. And you can put it in the chat or you can just say it out loud, whatever suits you. Too much info. Definitely too much info. Yeah. Information and text. Yes. Text is too small. Agreed. It doesn't breathe. Exactly. There's almost no white space. Yep. Contrast, overcrowded. Excellent. Yeah, this is exactly this background. It's super cute. This purple and pink, this design is like the background. The white throws me off. To me, the text could be different. Also, font size could be larger. Too many graphics in the background. Yes. The white background for the images throws me off. Yes, it looks very out of place having this white background with this very present purple design background. 3 columns seems like too much to read. Did not mean, no, nowhere close to the 40% white space. And I know that sounds like a lot, and it's just like I have so much information that I want to share. I have so much important research that I want to get onto this poster, but that's not the time. The time to do it is when you're conversing with the people that are looking at the poster. So you just want to give them enough to make them want more information. The paragraphs could be turned into bullet points. Exactly. Yes. Alignment issues. Yeah, exactly. We have here, this is not aligning. Yes, there's, okay, no text adjustment paragraph. Yes, okay, awesome. Yes, no text adjustment. Okay, you guys are nailing this. This is great. Um, there's so much good stuff here, but how it's coming together is just overwhelming, and that it's I don't know about you, but it's making like static in my brain when I look at this. This purple design in the background is super cute. I think it has a place for sure, but I do not see how it relates to this subject. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but I'm pretty sure this really playful lighthearted, fun design. Um, doesn't necessarily work with preventing overdose among Santa Ana's youth. That seems like a little bit more serious of a topic and issue. The resource sections are really small. Is it a brochure or a poster? What are the difference between the two? So there's a big difference between the two. A brochure is typically a lot smaller. It's something that you can take with you, a handout that you might get at a tabling event or something like that. Usually these research posters are quite massive. They're like 3 feet by 4 feet. So they're they're big. Definitely check the conference specs because they usually have the exact sizes that they want your poster to be, but generally they're around 3 feet by 4 feet, 4 feet by 3 feet. Um, so yeah, a brochure, I could see how you might think it's a brochure because it looks like it would be like a trifold, like there would be a fold here and here, but this is just how it's been set up. So again, that's pretty confusing, especially in a digital platform when you can't see it as a poster. Um, but again, we have so much going on here. There's yeah, there's way too much text. There's not enough breathing room. The text, the typeface choice isn't telling me anything. It doesn't speak to the research. I would, for this, I would maybe pick something a little more gentle. Um, this is Arial, which is a great, super legible font, but it's really modern and a bit heavy. We're School of Social Work, so we might want to use something a little more approachable and friendly. Um, there isn't nearly enough contrast here for this logo. These logos don't have enough breathing room around them. And again, these graphics, like there's so much more we could do with this data, right? I think here is maybe a brochure, if that's what we were talking about. And maybe their outreach to youth might look a little more playful and approachable, but I think as academic research, this is I'm getting confused. And then I'm not sure what these little bits are. So yeah, there's a lot to go on here. So let's move over to this one. What do you guys think about this one? What's working? What's not working? Again, we have Arial, which, yes, is a great typeface. If you have something more modern, really basic, but um, it doesn't say anything about the research. And type is such a great tool to help you communicate your research. Um, so I like the graphs, too many graphs, easier to read, but the title could be bigger. This is much better as it has most criteria such as color harmonies, white space, text alignments. The data visualizations are not popping out. Could do better with white space. No alert points. So what do we mean by alert points? I like the picture of the geese, but wonder if it could have attracted more people. If exactly. So let's start with the color. So when I think of Canada geese, first of all, I think of Canada. So we're dealing with, the flag is white and red. I the last thing I think about when I think of geese is this light gray. This gray doesn't communicate um survival and harvest rates of geese at all. I would pick something maybe a little more natural, maybe like a light brown or something that is pertains to the research. Again, a nice big picture of a goose with text wrapped around it might look really good. Um, yeah, the gray is really, really dull. Um, I think the non-alignment is intentional to signal that the more intended ones are subsets of the point above. Yes, I think so too, but there are additional ways to communicate that in typography. So, um, usually they are maybe less bold. So if you have these are your main bullet points, you might want to make this bold and the temperate breeding Canada geese breed throughout da 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 da, make that bold, and then these are less so. These are simple adjustments that you can do in your wherever you make your tables that give this text a lot more breathing room. You could recolor this to an appropriate color for um, your research. Um, Probably too many graphs here. And there are different things you can do to frame the pictures. So this does look like it could be really, really interesting information, but I don't know where to look. I know that like I just am looking at so many white graphs jumping out and I can't make sense of it. So again, my big qualm with this one is the color choices and the typeface choice. I guess yes, no references or acknowledgments. Too many graphs. But yeah, it's kind of dull looking and yeah. So thank you for humoring me there with the live critique of some research posters that I've come across. And it kind of gets your brain thinking about what you might be able to do to convey your research. So now we're going to talk about putting it all together and the output of your poster. So we're going to talk about the details. The details are not the details, they make the design. So you really, really need to kind of think big and then get more and more granular, which is what we're going to talk about. So at the outset, you're going to want to pick a software that you're comfortable using. I would recommend Canva, Google Slides, or PowerPoint, whichever one you're most comfortable using. Set up your document size to the conference specs. So double check what the conference wants your poster size to be. Sometimes you get a choice, but usually it's a specific size because they'll have a room set up for X amount of posters, and that's the space that you get. Margins and bleed. So bleed is when the content or your graphics go off the page. So if you think of a magazine, usually the photo goes all the way off the page. When it's being printed, the graphic actually goes beyond the page and then it's cut so that there's no like weird white line. We don't have to worry about bleed. I would just suggest having at least a 1 inch margin around the entire edge of your poster so nothing gets cut off by the printer because especially large format printing like a 48 by 36, sometimes the registration isn't perfect. And so you want to make sure that you have that margin so all of your content is nicely framed. Like if you think about when you have matting on a picture, it just sort of uh, makes it a little easier on the eye to view. So at least a 1 inch margin around the edge and always export for the printer as a PDF. Um, don't send them printer your PowerPoint or JPEG to print. That is not going to render well. and you might lose a lot of resolution in the process. So when I say you might lose a lot of resolution, I'm talking about dots per inch. So, and sometimes it's pixels per inch PPI, but because we're printing, it's dot per inch. Um, so if you have a 300 DPI, so a lot of 300 dots per inch, then you're going to have a lot crisper and better resolution of an image. 72 is the minimum I would do for screens. And 36 is just never done unless you're being very deliberate about something being super analog or something like that. So here's an example of how this can look. For your printing, you want to export your poster at 150 DPI. Um, this is what it can look like when you don't have high enough resolution. So this is at 50 dots per inch. This is at 72 and this is at 300. So you can see the difference in how crisp this logo is compared to this one and then compared to that one. And if you're importing graphics into your poster, you can right click on the graphic, and in the information about the graphic, you'll see what the DPI is on that on that image. And if you want to make the image bigger in your poster, the bigger you make it, the less resolution it's going to have. So if you have 300, an image that's 300 DPI, the biggest you could make it is 2 times as big. Because then you're at 150 DPI, half of 300. So if you want to be printing at least 150 DPI, you just need to be cognizant of the size of your images. Otherwise, they're going to look a little fuzzy. And sometimes can, depending on the resolution, can look almost illegible or just, not professional. So something to consider. Okay, so image use, what's allowed, what's not allowed. Before you just grab images off the internet or generate them in AI, check what's allowed and what's not. So the safest thing to do is to look for public domain images, which is up here. So this is a scale, a Creative Commons scale. So down here we have the least open usage. So that's a copyright image with all rights reserved. So usually a CC, when you see a CC, that's usually pretty good. A lot of providers have really relaxed rules for educational purposes. But you can always find the details on whatever site you're using. You may have to credit the artist or the provider. If you're using the image, it might be as simple as that. Or if it's for educational purposes, you might be able to use it. If you're not sure, ask your library's copyright librarian. They are such a well of knowledge about anything and everything copyright. It's just a much more complicated world than I can even wrap my head around. So if you're not sure, ask the copyright librarian. And now we are getting into free resources. So for design and editing software, GIMP, open source alternative to Photoshop. Inkscape is for vector graphics, and that's similar to Adobe Illustrator. For free stock photos and videos, you're not using videos in this application, obviously, but they have a lot of really beautiful videos. Pexels and Unsplash. There's also Pixabay, but I would recommend Unsplash over Pixabay as a start. Vectors, icons, and graphics, flat icon and line icons. And then one I forgot to add here is the noun project. Um, a really great resource for any kind of icon that you might be looking for. Um, or even sometimes I use it as if I'm creating icons from scratch, just what is the general consensus that this concept might look like as an icon? Because sometimes it's not out there, and so you kind of have to just see what other people are using, and it might spark something that will generate a new search for you. And the next page, we have typography and fonts that are available to you. So Google Fonts is awesome. They will show you, um, they have all the different font classifications. So you can say, I only want to see sans serif fonts. And then you can even scroll down once you pick one, and it'll show you a font pairing. So what's a second typeface that looks really good with this typeface that I've chosen? So you could use one typeface for your heading and your subheads, and then another one for your body text. And Google Fonts will tell you which ones are complementary and go well together. So it's an awesome resource. Font Squirrel is better for like more playful, probably more display text. They're not the best for like really um well thought out typefaces. Tools and interpretation. So Coolers is a great website if you want to try and find some complementary colors that will work well together. Um, And then, of course, there's BioRender and Tableau. That shouldn't be under, oh, yeah, it's under tools. So, BioRender is awesome if you're in the health sciences or you're studying healthcare. They have a lot of great tools, and Tableau as well. Amazing data visualization website. And I'm pretty certain you can either do free trials or if you have an educational license, sometimes you have licensing through your library as well. So, look into that. Um, Templates. There are so many templates out there for you to use. You can use PowerPoint templates, Canva templates. However, I find it's a lot easier to just find a poster style that you like and reference it and recreate it because templates, I I find they're just really, really frustrating unless your content is exactly the same length as what's in the template and your pictures are exactly the same size. It's not going to look right. So you need the flexibility that most templates don't usually offer. Just try and model your poster after a poster that you think fits your research. Accessibility, which Brintha will get into. So contrast checker. There's a website where you can plug in your foreground and uh, your background colors to make sure there's enough contrast there so it's legible. The Hemingway app, when we're talking about condensing our research, you can put all of your text into the Hemingway app and it will tell you what reading level it's at. When we're presenting at a conference and when we're doing knowledge mobilization, we want our reading level to be much, much lower than it might be if we were submitting a journal article. So I know it sounds ridiculous, but the golden rule is you want your reading level to be around like grade 7 or 8, which sounds silly because you're all doing like postgraduate research. But uh for knowledge mobilization, it's really important to sort of make the reading level as accessible as possible. And uh there's in the tutorial here, there's a guide to creating a poster in PowerPoint specifically. So how to set up the page, because you can't use the standard size that a PowerPoint slide would be. You have to change the like artboard size. So that tutorial is really helpful. Okay. that was a lot of information. Thank you so much for listening. Let's just look at some examples of what's working well. And I'm hoping you'll get inspired by seeing these examples and have you thinking about how you can put your research onto a beautiful poster. So here's a horizontal example. Again, we have the complementary colors with the blue and the orange here. We have some nice simple graphics. And here, a nice analogous color palette. Nice clear areas. And their data visualization is part of their color palette as well. It incorporates the chosen colors for the poster. I think this is sort of what I was thinking about when we were talking about how to make the goose poster a little better. Having maybe this bird, it really draws the eye in. You know what the research is going to be about somewhat, but it kind of draws you in. Okay. Um, that's everything. Yeah, thanks so much for listening. That was a lot of information. A lot of it's sort of common sense, but some of it's a little more specific, but hopefully it's helped you wrap your head around how you want to convey your research when it's time to condense it and visualize it. Rita, you have a question?
Yes, can you share the registration with us with the slides?
I'll share the slide deck with everyone that's here today.
Yeah, and the registration too,
The
the
regist
video that what we talked about, the
The
registration that
re
you took,
the recording, right? You
recorded.
want
Yeah,
Oh, the
yeah, recording.
recording, yes.
Sorry, yeah.
I think so. Jessica, will you be sharing the recording?
Hi, yes, we will be sharing the recording within about 2 weeks of from today, essentially, is usually the
Thank you.
turnaround time. Yep.
Another
It'll be on
question. Do
our
you ha yeah,
oh sorry, it'll be on our
so-
YouTube channel, but I'll send the link in an
yeah,
email after the session.
okay. I have another question. Do you have something about art? If we have to do poster about art.
Like the arts discipline.
Yeah,
Um, so your research is on art?
yeah.
Okay, so I mean that could look like a lot of different things. I think I would probably need to know a little bit more about the research. But yes, the short answer is yes, there's definitely ways that you could make a research poster on arts.
I can send you a message or an email about it, or we can speak now about it. I don't know how you
Yeah,
prefer.
yeah. Why don't you send me an email? I'll my information will go out with I think with the recording and the slide deck and
Yeah,
feel free to reach out to me about anything specific
okay,
that you might want to talk about.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Um okay, so we have some questions about printing. Yeah, printing's a big one. What about printing or saving it in what format is the best for printing and keeping the color the same way? Because in Photoshop it's different. Is it recommended for a poster to match the research paper or other materials? I know that each has a purpose or use. Should I look for an example? So the printing, you want to save it as a PDF. Always send the printer a PDF file that will uh, preserve the definition and the resolution of the elements in your poster. So definitely send them a PDF. So you can, if you're, I wouldn't recommend building your poster in Photoshop, but yes, you can, I would import, say, a JPEG from Photoshop. I would put that into your template, but I wouldn't, and then say your template's in PowerPoint and download the PowerPoint as a PDF. But it's okay if there's a JPEG in your PowerPoint, but you just want the overall print file to be a PDF. And then Hadil is asking, recommended for a poster to match a research paper or other materials. I mean, ideally, if you're going out with other knowledge mobilization pieces, it looks like a cohesive set. Like if you have a brochure or something. However, in the case that we were talking about with the purple background and the substance use, that might not be as appropriate. So it's contextual. But generally, if it's all knowledge mobilization pieces, then ideally they all look similar. And that works to your advantage as well because you've chosen fonts and images and colors that all help communicate your research. Does anyone else have any other questions before we move on to accessibility with Brintha? No? Okay, awesome. Thanks so much for listening. I know I ramble a little bit, so thanks for sticking with me, and I hope that this was really helpful for you, and I can't wait to see your posters. And again, please feel free to reach out to me if you're hitting your head against the wall when you're putting your poster together. Thanks so much, everyone. I'm gonna stop sharing and pass it over to Brintha.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Lee, for your presentation. I was thinking I wish I had that during when I was a PhD student. For my posters, it would have helped me a lot. I'm going to jump in with the accessibility lens. It's not going to take a lot of time. It's just going to be quick 10 minutes. That's going to be very technical, and some of the elements have already been covered by Lee during her presentation. So I'm Brenda Kanisha Chandra. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the EDI specialist with Bridging Divides. And so jumping in with the accessibility lens, I really want you to think about your audience here, because you will have a diversity of people in your audience and who also experience different who also experience accessibility in different ways. So you may have people with low vision, people who use screen readers, people who experience dyslexia beyond the autism spectrum, have processing or attention differences, or even experience anxiety, for example, in crowded poster sessions. Some people may also face temporary or situational barriers such as fatigue, noise, time constraints, or language differences. I'm sure we've all been in those places. And I can only say that many people experience more than one access need at the same time. So when we have posters that have dense text, complex language use, visual clutter, or sometimes also inaccessible design choices that we don't make intentionally, this can come and exclude people with disabilities and different learning styles, or also varied life circumstances. So what I really want to do throughout this section is really to invite you to actually think about your audience when you also and the diversity in your audience when you create your poster. And it means that you need to intentionally design your work so that more people can understand, engage with, and learn from your research. And accessibility is not just about simplifying your research or lowering standards. It's just about removing those unnecessary barriers so that your complex ideas are not limited to a small audience as well. So all in all, we can say that a good scientific poster is actually an accessible poster. So I'm going to jump in now with some technical details for the text and language, images, and color and contrast and all of that on how to be more inclusive. So regarding text and language, there are certain uh, fonts or typefaces. This is new. I learned that today that are recommended. So for the typefaces slash fonts, it is recommended to use the sans serif typefaces. So Arial, Calibri, Helvetica, Verdana, Atkinson, hyper eligible because they are easier to read for many people, but also because they include some people with, for example, dyslexia. We also recommend not using more than 2 or 3 fonts across the entire poster to avoid visual confusion and to avoid also highly cursive script or highly decorative fonts or typefaces. Regarding text sizes, Lee mentioned that your text needs to be readable 10 feet away. There are also some sizes that are recommended in order to ensure that for the title, the minimum would be 72 point to 158 point being the best practice. Regarding section headings, 46 point to 56 point being the ideal section heading size, and for body text 24 minimum to 36 being the ideal as well. And of course, use spacing for body text. He has already mentioned it, and 1.5 is the best spacing size. Also, throughout your text, it is highly recommended to also use bold text and also bold words. I would rather say for important information so it stands out within your text. Avoid relying just on color, using italics, underlining, and all caps. Bold is what is standing out more, and also to use plain languages, writing clear and plain language. Avoid using everything that's idioms, metaphors, or figures of speech, and also define the terms, the specialist terms that you're using, and spell out all the acronyms that you are as well using throughout your poster to ensure that everyone can understand the poster. And use short sentences and bullet points to communicate your ideas and results. And one tip is to ask someone outside your field to read your summary and explain it back to you to make sure that your ideas are clear and that you have also defined your specialist terms. Sometimes we're so much into our field that we also forget that there's so many people who will read your posters coming outside your field. And in order to make it even more accessible, it's good to it's a good practice. Regarding color and contrast, there's a lot of elements that have already been covered. So it is recommended to use a limited color palette, 3 to 5 color is enough, and ensure high contrast between text and background. So don't use like for example, yellow on a white background, for example, or a light gray on a white background. This will come and create a barrier for people with vision impairment, for example. So I would suggest using a black or dark gray text on a white background, so high contrast, and do not place text or patterns over patterns, gradient, or images. That's not recommended at all because, of course, visually first of all, visually, I think it's not the best design, but also it creates accessibility challenges. Avoid all colors that are very bright and highly saturated. And as Lee also mentioned, avoid using red and green combinations for color blindness. It also makes it that we cannot, like, people won't see those colors as well. And you can check color combination using contrast or color blindness checker. You have many that are available online. You can just type on Google contrast checker or color blindness checker, and you have different sets of tools that are also available. Regarding images, figures, and graphics, in order to ensure that your images are visible for people with different vision level, we encourage to use 200 to 300 dpi images. These are large, clear, and high resolution images. And Lee also showed like the different pictures, how it would look like if you have lower dpi. So we encourage using higher dpi as well. Use images in a strategic way, like in a way to support the text or replace the text content, not as purely decorative. And also we encourage using simplified figures over complex figures to ensure that your data are also accessible and not overwhelming in the context. Of course, for captions and descriptions, it is recommended to use captions for all images, graphs and diagrams. So there are also other ways of understanding what is presented, and to use also what we call alternative text for non-decorative images. So usually it's something that is used in e-version of your poster. I'll come to it afterwards. But alternative text are text description of your image. There's a page by Harvard University. If you type alternative text Harvard University, you will get it, that describe how to describe an image. So it's usually describe the type of the image. Is it a logo, illustration, painting, and then having a very short sentence to describe it. For example, I would say a photo of a group of young college students laugh and walk along a tree-lined pathway. But I will get back to this later on during the presentation, because I will suggest also alternative ways of presenting your poster. Regarding layout and structure, again, Lee has mentioned most of it. So the idea is to use a clear, logical reading order, so people with different cognitive background and learning styles as well are able to read your poster. Use a linear layout, avoid jumping from one side to the other, and don't use more than 4 columns so it stays structured all throughout. I would even suggest more like 3 columns, and have, as we mentioned earlier, have those white spaces that are very important to help the brain rest between informations as well. And have the main research finding prominent and written in plain language at the beginning as a summary. So we also touched upon that, to use a language that is easy to understand, not only because you're addressing to people with who are not always expert in your field, but also you're addressing yourself to a diversity of people with also different knowledge, but also different diversity, coming from different diversity backgrounds as well. So avoid also long paragraph, use bullet lists and numbered lists when orders matter, and include, as I said, brief introduction and major takeaway questions and conversation starters as well. When you are doing the in-person presentation of your poster, take time to speak. I know that sometimes we have very limited time and we want to say everything about our research, and sometimes it's rather best to just include few findings and to speak at a steady pace and to pause regularly to allow processing as well within your audience. Talking about presentation, your poster session can also be challenging for people who are deaf, hard of hearing, or have also speech disorders. So here are some suggestions that you can implement when you are presenting. For example, to use a notepad, a device, or even piece of paper to exchange written notes that you can circulate throughout the room, where people can write the question they want to ask, for example, and then you can respond to the questions when the paper comes back to you. Also, offer and be open to explaining the poster verbally to a group or to an individual. You can mention at the beginning that if needed, you're also open to explaining the poster individually. Another element is that you can also include a QR code or a short link to an accessible digital version for asynchronous engagement with your poster. So it can be a PDF, PowerPoint, a doc file, large or small prints also that you can share in person, or it can also be an external and accessible web platform. So this enables, for example, having an e-version enables screen reader to read through your document. And for screen readers to be able to read the document, there are certain checkboxes that you need to have is to use, for example, separate text boxes for titles, headings, and body text to make sure that the screen reader can read each layer, and also add those alternative text to all images and mark them as decorative. And also it is recommended to avoid tables, because sometimes back in the days, I don't know if screen readers are better now, it would be very hard for screen readers to read the tables, especially if you don't put the header rows. So if you want to provide an e-version that is easier for screen readers to read, we suggest putting like summaries through bullet points. Also, on Word, you have the built-in accessibility checker. So I highly recommend using that, and to fix all flagged issues by the accessibility checker, and to make sure that your PDF is screen reader friendly. As I said, also ensure that all the heading levels are there to ensure navigation for screen reader. And you can also provide your materials in other format. For example, it can be an audio or a video with audio description, audio with a transcript as well of your poster. So I would say like few elements to keep in mind is to really focus on your audience and focus on the key message you want to deliver, and to really think about the diversity in the audience and their needs when you are also creating your poster. So this comes to these are few technical things that you can implement when you are creating your poster. And if you want me to help you double check if it's like accessible enough, you can feel free to reach out to my email address. And yes, a good poster is an accessible poster. So I would highly recommend taking that lens also when you create your poster. I don't know if there are any questions. I forgot to precise, I'm also putting everything in a guide form, so I will be sharing this with Jessica by the end of the week, so she can also send those details out.
Rita asked, what are the dimensions of the standard poster? So generally it's 48 inches by 36 inches for the horizontal, and then vertical is 36 by 48. But sorry, my light keeps going out. Definitely check the conference specs because they will specify what dimensions they want your poster to be.
All right. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Brintha. Thank you, everyone, for joining.